Welcome to Baiju's. The history of South India between 8th and 12th century is a history of integration of small states into large empires. It is also the history of the immense development in the field of art and culture and India's expedition to Southeast Asia. When we talk about a large empire in South, in the Tamil land, we think of Cholas. We mention Imperial Cholas because Cholas have been existing right from the time of Ashoka. Ashokan inscriptions, the major rock edict 13 also mentions about Chola, Pandya and Chera kingdoms. So we will talk about an empire which was confined not only in the Indian subcontinent, which started from the Kaveri basin but extended as far as Java Sumatra region, in extending its influence also in China in terms of diplomacy and commerce. The Chola kingdom is also referred to as by the historians as Thalassocratic empire. Thalassocratic empire means an empire having immense maritime influence. Imperial Cholas, we recognize the Cholas in terms of the large Dravida style temples, in terms of the development of assemblies at various levels, in terms of their control over Bay of Bengal, which turned out to be a Chola village. So the term Imperial Cholas, which generally we study, refers to a time period around 8th to 12th century. Whereas the reference of Cholas have been found even earlier. Who were the Cholas? So before we talk about the imperial history of Cholas, let us understand who were the Cholas. Because reference of Cholas have been found much earlier than 8th century. As I said, the earliest reference have been found in the Ashokan inscriptions. The Ashokan inscriptions refer to the states of Chola, Chera and Pandya in extreme south. The reference of Chola have also been found in Buddhist texts. Buddhist texts Mahavamsa refers to a Chola prince who went to Sri Lanka and conquered a piece of the territory. The rise of Cholas, it has been interpreted by historians in multiple ways. But the common agreement is that Cholas were earlier they were a small peasant community. A small peasant community which gradually acquired power, turned into a tribal polity, and gradually, over a period of time, by 8th century, they were able to establish the foundations of one of the largest empires in South India. The earliest reference of Cholas is also, the early references are also found in the Sangam texts. So we say that Sangam texts refers to some of the prominent kings such as Karandam, such as Karaikal Chola. In those times, the capitals of the Chola was, there were two capitals, Urayur and Kaveri Pattanam. But we don't know much about them. Then came the imperial Cholas from 8th century, and we speak about Cholas who displaced Pallavas, defeated Cheras, Pandyas, and gradually acquired their control over the almost the entire of Tamil Nadu, Karnataka, and the present day Kerala. The names of Rajaraja first and his son Rajendra first echoes as one of the most important of the imperial Cholas who defined the Chola imperialism or what the Chola achieved in these centuries. Then we have later Cholas also. Later Cholas from 1218 to 1280, this was a phase of decline, and here also we hear of few of the prominent Chola kings. We hear of Rajaraja II and the last of the later Chola kings as Rajendra Chola the third. After their decline, their position or their territory was acquired by the Chalukyas of Vengi, the Hoysalas of Karnataka, the Pandyas of Madurai, and also in Sri Lanka. In Sri Lanka, also they acquired power. So, all that we will study, all that we will focus is upon the imperial Cholas because This was the real phase of development. This was the time when they achieved everything, and the entire most of the historical analysis about the Cholas is centered around this time period, around these 4 centuries. So let us understand about Imperial Cholas. The Imperial Cholas, the foundation of Imperial Chola was established by Vijayalaya. In fact, in the opening slide, the temple that you see, Vijayalaya Choleshwaram temple, constructed by its founder, and he was a Shaivite by his belief system. Vijayalaya. Vijayalaya was a feudatory of Pallavas who defeated them. In fact, Pallavas were given a decisive blow by Aditya Chola. So Vijayalaya established, he laid the seeds of a Chola kingdom, a small state with its capital at Tanjore, or it is also written as Tanjavur, around 850, and later his successor Aditya Chola defeated them conclusively. And gradually after this, we see that one by one, all of the important political powers were either they were completely annexed or they were subordinated. The greatest threat or the greatest obstacle in the rise of the Cholas was the Rashtrakuta. The Rashtrakuta king Krishna III had defeated and acquired the northern territory of Chola kingdom. So he had acquired the northern Chola territory, but after the demise, after the death of Krishna III, the Cholas emerged, or the Cholas resurged without any bounds or limits. And within the next 50, 60 years, they were able to capture the entire of what we call as Tamilkam, or the Tamil land. So this is how they started. The history of Cholas is the history of a peasant class which had some political history around the Sangam age, but who really expressed themselves or who really organized themselves, assuming all the characteristics of a monarchical state from 8th 9th century. From 8th century we say because around this time the Pallavas were on a decline, and it was finally in 850 that Vijayalaya, a feudal lord, expressed his autonomy, expressed his desire to claw back all the influence of the Pallavas. When we speak of Imperial Cholas, any discussion is incomplete without explaining, without emphasizing upon the exploits or the contributions of two prominent kings, that is Raj Raja and Rajendra first. Both of them. Rajendra was the son of Raj Raja the first. Raj Raja, or his tenure, was the formative stage of Chola imperialism. When I say Chola imperialism, what do we mean? We mean the policy of the Cholas to expand territorially. It was revealed in the policy of conquest and subordination. Chola imperialism is also revealed when their king calls themselves as Chakravarti. Again, here we see that in the extreme south also some of the attributes of North Indian monarchy was copied, or it was in a way influenced with the arrival of Brahmanism in the south. The king claimed Kshatriya status, and the king associated by giving grants to the Brahmanas and the temples. So here again we see an effort to claim ritual legitimacy. When I say ritual legitimacy, I simply mean that a king is there, the king gives donations to the Brahmins, to the temples, and then the Brahmins, and during the temple ceremonies, by invoking the god, the king is presented as a representative of God. Hence, the idea which is expressed is that God has chosen the king, and loyalty to God cannot happen or cannot come without loyalty to the king. Raj Raja first, he started a chain of expeditions. He began by punishing and capturing the Chera navy, Chera kingdom's navy at Trivandrum. It is believed that one of the envoys of Raj Raja was insulted by the Chera king Bhaskara Ravi Varmana. So to punish Bhaskar Ravi Varman, but we know that the real intention of Raj Raja was to exploit the trade of Malabar coast. So by capturing the Chera navy, by capturing the western coast, they wanted to control the Arabian Sea trade. And while he was marching, he to Chera kingdom in the present day Kerala, he crossed the Pandyan territory. And the Pandyan king Amar Bhujang, he protested. When the Pandyan king protested, he was also subjugated. So after the Cheras, it was the turn of the Pandyas. After Pandyas, he turned to Kurg and made Kurg a feudatory state. Again, when I say feudatory state, means he conquered it but placed it under the administration of a lord who recognized the suzerainty or sovereignty of the king. So again, in like feudalism, as we had discussed in North India before the Delhi Sultanate, there was a kind of overlord vassal relationship. He also conquered the western Ganga territory of Gangavadi, and by doing so, the entire Mysore region. Now they were extending from Tamil Nadu, after Tamil Nadu to Kerala, Kerala to Karnataka. So by defeating the western Gangas, they were able to control the entire piece of land from the tip of Indian subcontinent in south to Karnataka. After that, he was not satisfied and he extended his control over northern Sri Lanka, that is, which was known as Ceylon. So, northern Ceylon, the king Mahindra V, it is said that the king Mahindra V, he fled at the sight of the arrival of a ocean of the army of Raj Raja first. And Anuradhapura was renamed as Chola Mandalam. To overawe, to create a feeling of fear and to instill loyalty in the hearts and minds of the local population of Sri Lanka, the Raj Raja, he deliberately brought a large army, more than what was required for actual battle or conquest. So this was also a policy of the Cholas that wherever they went, they carried a huge army and entourage so as to overawe, to instill fear in the hearts and minds of his adversary. After that, we see that they were engaged in a conflict in peninsular India with the Western Chalukyas. The conflict of Cholas with Western Chalukyas, or who were known as Chalukyas of Kalyani, was a long struggle. So, Cholas versus Chalukyas of Kalyani, they were involved in a struggle which was not decisive. Sometimes the Cholas were able to win over. Sometimes, whenever the Cholas turned their head or turned their attention towards other issues, there was recapture or reassertion of the territory. So it was for the control of Tungabhadra Doab. Tungabhadra Doab would emerge as an important piece of territory and as a bone of contention later between the Vijayanagar and the Bahmani kingdom. So Tungabhadra Doab for the control of the present day Rayalaseema region, which was then known as Vengi. So Vengi or Rayalaseema region and northern Karnataka. Raj Raja was able to defeat and establish a protectorate state in Vengi. Protectorate means the king was allowed to rule. The Eastern Chalukyan king was allowed to rule, but again he received or he was completely dependent upon Raj Raja, that is the Chola administration. It is said that after Vengi, he even conquered Maldives. So Raj Raja's imperialism was the imperialism of a king who was not satisfied to safeguard or to control the nearby frontier states, but he wanted to extend his control so as to control the entire trade of Indian Ocean. So we see in Raj Raja an attempt of a king whose imperialistic policies, whose policy of territorial annexation was also linked with his commercial interests. He was succeeded by his son Rajendra I, who even before his accession to the Chola throne had gained the reputation of the Samudragupta of South. Rajendra I, or the reign of Rajendra I, symbolized the climax of Chola imperialism. He expanded the Chola territory to the maximum limit. He continued the policy of conquest and subordination of his father. He annexed Sri Lanka and imprisoned Mahendra V. He also defeated the Cheras. He annexed the Pandyans also. And in fact, Madurai, he sent one of his sons as viceroy. So Madurai was created as the viceroyalty of Cholas, and his son was given the title of Chola Pandya. So the difference between the approach of Rajendra and Rajaraja was that Rajendra insisted more on direct control, other like that, not like that of his father, who was happy on mere subordination. Tungabhadra, the long-standing dispute with the Western Chalukyas was settled. The Western Chalukyan king of Kalyani, Jayasimha, he accepted whatever terms were offered to him by Rajendra first. And between the Cholas and Chalukyas of Kalyani, Tungabhadra was established as the border. What we know of Rajendra first is because of a famous expedition. It is believed that once he crossed Godavari and he even went further north of Mahanadi river, crossing Bastar and Odisha, and he defeated a king in Bengal, Mahipala first. It is believed that while crossing Bengal, he crossed the river Ganges and he again defeated a local ruler who accepted the suzerainty, who accepted the overlordship of a king who was operating from distant south. So this, because he was able to cross the river Ganges and defeat the kings in Bengal, Bihar, and come back with the water of Ganges as a proof, he gained the title of Gangai Konda Chola. So he is also known as the Gangai Konda Chola because a person who was from the Chola kingdom, who was from the Chola land, and he went and he even uh, uh, asserted his control over the Ganges territory. In fact, to commemorate his important incident, he even constructed a temple. And the name of the temple is also Gangai Konda Cholapuram. In fact, Gangai Konda Chola was also the capital, the new capital which was established by Rajendra first and which remained for the next 250 years. At Gangai, besides the Gangai Konda Chola temple, we also find a temple that is Brihadeshwar temple. Please do not confuse Brihadeshwar temple with the another more famous Brihadeshwar temple of Tanjore. So here also we have a similar temple. So we know that it was a practice of the Chola kings, of the imperial Cholas, that whenever they used to return from a successful military expedition, they used to either raise a new temple or they used to raise the images, the statues of kings and queens alongside gods and goddesses in the temple complex. So this attributed this, besides assuming royal titles, besides assuming the title of Parakeshri, so they assumed huge big titles, title of Gangai Konda Chola. They also tried to bring an element of divine kingship. So when we talk about Chola imperialism, it is not only about territorial conquests. It is not only about territorial conquests which were defined by their commercial interests, but it was also about a peasant class which gradually emerged as one of the most powerful empires in South, covering the entire of what we call South of Deccan region. But it was also about their aspiration to be recognized as descendants of lunar and solar dynasty, and also as Kshatriyas who were lions, who were Parakeshri, who were known as Avakeshri. So please understand that how the polity is changing. So now we have in evidence in the entire ancient India where people from all backgrounds, despite the Varna injunction which says that only a Kshatriya is entitled to rule. So we have numerous evidences in the entire course of ancient India where people from all types of backgrounds are emerging as a ruling class. And what better example than that of the Cholas, who came from a very humble origin. In fact, there is a lot of debate. Nobody knows exactly. Some say that they were feudatories of Pallavas. That is for sure. But we don't know about their caste. We don't know about their varna or their jati. They also, speaking of Rajendra Chola, he went further east in Southeast Asia. He captured the island of Kadaram, and in fact, he subjugated the Sri Vijaya kingdom. Again, why did he go further to Sri Vijaya kingdom and conquer it? It is believed that Sri Vijaya kingdom and its ruler King Sangram was interfering in the commercial relations, trade relations of the Cholas with the Chinese. He was aware, King Sangram and the ministers, that this was a profitable trade, and this trade was dependent upon the Malacca Strait. Even today, we see that one of the prominent factors because of which South China Sea is disputable. It is a disputed reason is also because of its mineral profile. It is also because of its marine resource, but majorly because it is a choke point in terms of international sea trade. In fact, going by multiple accounts, as much as two-thirds of the global trade goes through the Malacca Strait, because of which the Chinese are very much interested and they want to have a major say in Southeast Asia. That was the case earlier also. That was the case that Sri Vijaya Kingdom, who were ruling in Java Sumatra region, they were aware of the immense potential, immense benefit, profit that this sea trade could accrue to them if they had complete control. And Rajendra the First, he, when his father had already captured, he had captured Maldives, and he himself had annexed Sri Lanka, he could not tolerate it. And this king, he was forced to accept the sovereignty of the Cholas. Historical accounts portraying it as a battle between Shaivites and Buddhists is not true, because a king who is more pragmatic, despite his Brahminical inclination, would not go that far to punish a king, mainly on the grounds of religious differences. So, in this map, we have discussed already that from the time of Raj Raja first to Rajendra, they tried to expand. So in this, we can see that again, this is the Malacca Strait. So this is the Malacca Strait. And here in the Malacca Strait, they extended their influence by subjugating the Sri Vijaya kingdom. Gangai Konda Cholapuram, it was the capital from the time of Rajendra first. And they Thanjavur was the earlier capital. They were able to, Kanchipuram was again another prominent city. It was a trade center, and as you can see in the map that their control, their influence was much larger. It was much larger than a directly administered region. That is how it is in the case of most of the empires of ancient India, of medieval India also, because it is not possible. Romila Thapar says that it is not possible for a far-fetched empire to maintain same degree of administrative control over the entire empire. So this policy of subordination, this policy of conquest and subordination enabled them to exercise influence over far-flung areas also. We can see that even in Myanmar, even in East India, they had their influence. And this was primarily because of the visionary foresight of Rajendra first. The Cholas were not only, the Cholas imperialism was not only about wars and battles, it was also about diplomacy. Diplomacy which was guided mainly by commercial relations. Commercial relations with China, it can be attested from the fact that in mid 11th century, there are numerous accounts, but one of the prominent accounts says that in mid 11th century, a large contingent of Chola traders and merchants reached China with a supply of ivory, rhinoceros horns, brocade. Again, brocade is used as ornaments, glass, etc. So luxury goods, it was all about. So there was huge demand of Indian luxury goods in China, and they received copper currency as payment. So there was sound relations with East Asia, which when was interrupted by Sri Vijaya kingdom, they were punished. Speaking of the descendants of the successors of Rajendra I, they could not maintain the momentum. In fact, we see that from 1218, we do not have an exact time period, but we see that from the later times of 13th century, beginning from 13th century, the Cholas, their influence began to decline. The decline of Cholas was also because of the revival of regional powers. So we see the revival of Chalukyas of Vengi. We see the revival of Hoysalas of Mysore region and the Pandyas of Madurai. And even in Sri Lanka, the Sinhala power, they were able to reassert and retrieve the lost territory in the northern part of the island kingdom. The greatest of the later Cholas is Kolotunga Chola, who who is remembered more for his pacifist administrative policies. History is always written and dictated by the conqueror. So it is but natural that in any course of an empire in the declining phase, less of historical accounts survive because the king facing scarcity of economic resource is not able to contribute much towards the patronage of art and culture which survive in the form of architecture, sculpture, or also by patronizing the quotations or the historians. However, Kolatunga Chola is who is remembered as a pacifist administrator. He is remembered because he exempted tolls and relieved the population of the Chola kingdom from the huge tax burden. Because as we will see that the Cholas were able to mobilize, they were able to raise not only a large standing army, but also a large naval fleet on the basis of a sound resource base, a sound revenue base. So let us speak about Chola's administration. Before going into the nitty gritty of Chola administration, we have to understand that what time period of Indian history we are talking about. We are talking about early medieval times, and early medieval time of Indian history was a phase of feudalization which happened majorly in the north, but its influence was also seen in the south. So the Chola administration, we see both centralizing and decentralizing elements. We see centralizing elements or centralizing tendency in the form of a monarchical setup, an all powerful king who, by assuming royal titles, by giving vast donations, and also by emphasizing upon a policy of territorial conquest, is trying to be assert his power, trying to concentrate more and more power. But we also find decentralizing tendency even in the Chola administration. We find a decentralizing tendency in the form of numerous corporate assemblies. So we will be discussing more about local administration. So local administration was carried out by a number of assemblies. Chola administration, the decentralizing tendency can also be seen by the coexistence of a number of feudatories who were in conflict with the Cholas. Example, Chalukyas of Kalyani. Example, even the Pandyas who were defeated, they were trying to reassert them and to regain their lost territory and privilege. So this is the core idea when we talk about Chola administration. Definitely it had a bureaucracy, it had a top down approach, but the centralizing element, the bureaucratic element was not as vast as if we compare to the Mauryans or even the Gupta times. So please remember that centralizing tendency, or which I'll say as capital C, and decentralizing tendency as DC, Both existed side by side. Decentralizing tendency in the form of popular assemblies, in the form of coexistence of feudatories. It was a monarchical administration. Again, this is a centralizing tendency. Monarchical administration with the king claiming Kshatriya status, with the king assigning himself divinity, and also with a system of hereditary succession. Although the scheme of primogeniture or succession by eldest son was not there. The king appointed a ministerial council. A ministerial council whose officials were paid through land grants. Again, the system of land grants is again a symbol of feudalization because despite all the resources that they were mobilizing, the circulation of currency or coins was not as much as the earlier times. These officials who performed various functions were classified as higher officials and lower officials. Higher officials were known as Perundaram and lower officials as Sirudaram. There were multiple administrative units as well. First, the entire kingdom was divided into provinces. So, again, this is a common scheme across all the empires. Any empire, it is divided into a number of provinces. For example, today we have states, 28 states. So, each of these provinces, so the provinces were known as Mandala or Mandalam. It was under a viceroy. Generally, the viceroy was from the ruling family, either the sons or from the extended family. The mandala was divided into kottam. Kottam was intermediary between a district and a province. Then we have Nadu. Nadu in Tamil means settled agricultural area. So we have Tamil Nadu, a land where Tamil is spoken and a land where agriculture is the primary occupation or which has emerged out of a peasant class. So Nadu was a very important unit. Nadu was the district. Nadu, we will see that it is also the name of an assembly of all the agriculturist class. Nadu was the basic or it was an important revenue collection unit. It was an important politico administrative unit. Beneath the Nadu was Kurram. Kurram was a union of villages. And then at the lowest, we had village as the basic unit of administration. They emphasized on revenue collection, on revenue mobilization, so as to raise a vast army, so as to meet the demands of donation to the temples and all other expenses. So, land revenue was again the primary source of revenue. It is believed that during the times of Raj Raja the first, land tax, which was estimated to be one third of the produce and collected in cash or kind, was only after an elaborate survey of land. All this information is on the basis of the inscriptions. So the elaborate survey of land, it was one third of the produce. And even such was the rigorous nature of land revenue collection that even the temple land was not exempted. So the temples also had land attached to them for their maintenance. So even the temple land had to pay land tax. Besides this, the Cholas were also known to invest on irrigation. So they invested on irrigation and levied irrigation tanks. They constructed dams to divert the water from the rivers to through canals to the agricultural field. They also collected tolls on a number of commercial operations. Tolls were most probably they were abolished during the time of later Cholas. Kolotunga Chola first. Professional tax. Again, on a number of professions, service providers, they were charged with professional tax, which was levied mainly in urban areas. They also taxed on mines, forests, salt pans, and they controlled external trade. So, as I've said that because of the imperialism, because of the control of Southeast Asia, Bay of Bengal turned out to be a Chola village. By capturing the Chera navy, they were also able to exercise their control over Malabar trade. And how did they invest it? How did they spend it besides paying the officials who were also paid through land grants. They also invested in public works such as infrastructural projects, roads, bridges, ferries, irrigation was a major area of public investment by the state. Investment in terms of both artificial irrigation, in terms of tank irrigation, and dams and canals. But the farmers were levied irrigation cess, irrigation tax for the use of public utility. They also had a vast military in terms of a standing army and a vast navy fleet. It is said that the standing army, which also imported horses from Arabia, however, the horses were not able to survive long because of the because of the hot and humid climate of the extreme south, Tamil Nadu. The army was managed in a corporate way. So we have reference of corporate management of military. And it is said that the military, it was so well resourced, well funded, that the military also made donations to the temple. Regarding the development of navy, very rarely do we see in the entire course of ancient history, even in medieval history, leaving aside, say, Mauryas, who developed a small naval fleet. And then we speak of Shivaji Maharaj, who also had a naval fleet. Naval development or navy was largely ignored by most of the rulers of ancient and medieval India, something which was exploited and which provided for the supremacy of the Europeans when they came in the form of traders and merchants and later were able to exert their political influence. But in the case of Cholas, we have seen that the navy was able to enabled their extension of not only territorial control but also commercial control in far-flung island countries. There is a reference of the Velaikaras who were personal guards of the kings. So they were so much loyal to the king that at the time of their induction, they used to take a vow that if time comes or if a situation arises, they would sacrifice their life without blinking. In fact, they would even burn themselves for the safety of their king. So again, this Valaikaras, it signified the element of devotionalism or loyalty which the Cholas exercised over their population. The Senapati Mahadand Nayak or even Nayak was a powerful person who was appointed by the king and who was paid through land grants. So by hearing of this, we are able to understand that at least in the centrally controlled areas, the Chola administration was a continuation of the administration, and it in many ways reflected what was seen earlier in the north of Vindhyas. So that in centrally controlled areas, it was a continuation of North Indian polity. However, it was not about excessive control. It was not only about a centralized empire. When the study of Cholas began, then the earliest response of many of the historians was to build a glamorous picture of a very powerful empire, an empire which even in those days had its say in Southeast Asian affairs. But gradually, with more and more historical evidences coming up in the form of inscriptions, in the form of texts, religious and both secular texts, historians came to be aware of the coexistence of local assemblies. So these local assemblies functioned in their own way, but they were not completely autonomous or they were not completely cut off from the centralized polity. They received from time to time instructions and they even obliged the sovereignty of the central polity by paying revenue in the form of taxes. But the coexistence of these assemblies also gave the historians a semblance of democracy. So when we speak of local government or these corporate assemblies at various levels who recognized the sovereignty of the central power of they recognized the position of the king but operated autonomously. Historians have spoken a lot when new evidences about the existence of local assemblies. One of the prominent evidence that emerged from the rule of Prantaka first was the Uttara Merur inscriptions, in which elaborate description is given about the village assemblies, about the village sabha, how they functioned, how the election happened. Then again, a new uh, perception was created. So the historians of India, because the Britishers said that Indians don't have any uh, history of democratic polity or democratic culture, and it is we, the British, who have trained, we have introduced the idea of democracy. So the new evidences provided a new lease of life to the historians. They said that these corporate assemblies and their functioning in many ways symbolized the operation of democracy. They epitomized democratic ideals in those times. So this is how we will try to understand, and then we will see that whether really they were democratic or not. Because if a question comes in art and culture in your GS paper one, that even before the arrival of Britishers in India, India had a tradition of democratic polity during various times. Then you can write about the tribal republics during the age of Mahajanpads, which you would have definitely studied during your 6th century BC and associated polity. You can also refer to the various degree to which democratic polity was exercised in the corporate assemblies during Chola times. So let us see that what was the nature, what was the nomenclature of these assemblies. We hear of Nadu. Again, the term Nadu is used for a settled area. It is used for a settled agricultural area. Nadu in administration also symbolized a district. Nadu was also an assembly of landholding peasants. Landholding peasants, the prominent of them were known as Nattar. So the head of the prominent landholding peasants were known as Nattars, who were the members of the assemblies. And this Nadu was the unit of revenue collection for the state. It was also the unit of politico administration. This land holding was further segregated into two sections. One, land holding by the Brahmanas, this which was known as Brahmade. So the land holding Brahmanas, they constituted the Brahmade class, and then the Velan Vagai segments or settlements which was inhabited by non-Brahmins. It is believed that Brahmade or the Brahmins who were owners of land, they had their separate assembly, and the name of the assembly was Sabha and Mahasabha. These Mahasabha and Sabha functioned in their own way. Although we have idea of the various eligibility criteria for Sabha and Mahasabha, such as age criteria in terms of 40 years, such as having command over Vedic knowledge, being a person of integrity or unscrupulous character, means having a fair character and having no track record of crime. But we do not know how these members who were eligible they were elected. Probably it is felt that the membership or constitution of Sabha and Mahasabha was through Varnashram Dharma, means they then maybe they would have recognized, they would have paid heed to the Varnashram Dharma. So even in extreme south, from the time of Saint Augustine, the Vedic rituals, the Vedic order was, it was sanctified and it was preserved in its own way. Speaking more of Brahmade, it is believed that these Brahmade lands or these Brahman held land, sometimes they were constituted as a separate village within a Nadu. So the Brahmade lands, all of them were consolidated and they were assessed separately. So a separate village was there which was known as Taniyur. So we have non-Brahmins performing their corporate functions in their own way. They having their own assemblies, and the Brahmades or the Brahmins who were land holding class also having their own assemblies to manage their affairs. So they managed multiple types of affairs. Speaking of the functions of Sabha and Mahasabha, Sabha and Mahasabha facilitated in tax collection. They also exercised judicial functions, because of which in inscriptions there is reference to Sabhas functioning as Dharmasthana. So they performed judicial functions. And there is reference of officials, Karnatan, Madhyastha. They also managed temple complex. Sometimes these Brahmins were allotted land which came with a clause that they had to take care of the temples also. The Sabhas functioned through various committees. These committees were known as Varyams. So again, just understand that there is a piece of land, or there is a integration of small pieces of lands under the Brahmanas, and this is given a designation of a separate administrative unit. In this, various committees are there which will take care of various functions, such as functions of management of tank, such as management of roads, management of tax collection, management of accounts. So because of which various varyams or committees have been referred to in these inscriptions. There is a reference of prominent varyam known as Samvatsara Varyam. Samvatsara Varyam was an annual committee which supervised the overall administration. Then we also hear of Eri Varyam. Eri Varyam was associated with maintenance of tank. We also hear of Pon Varyam, gold related operations. So, etc. There are multiple names. You don't have to be worried about these examples, but just remember that these Varyams, these committees, they were having members which were members of the Sabha, and they were responsible for performing specific functions. In the non-Brahmade lands, or in the Velang Vagai villages, we have the reference of assembly known as Ur, which also had its own set of officials such as the Nyayatar and the Tandal. Again, they performed, these assemblies were recognized by the center, because despite being autonomous, they facilitated in the administration of land revenue, administration of public works. Another assembly which comprised of the traders and merchant class was known as Nagaram, and as the name itself reveals, it was functional in the urban areas. So it was an assembly of traders of Nadu, again in a district, which operated in market areas. It controlled market operations. Again, a reference of a official is there, Nagaraka Kanakku. These nagrams were also delegated powers to collect cess on market operations. They facilitated in the collection of tolls also. And in fact, some of these nagrams were so prosperous and resourceful that by making donations to the temple, they even had a major say in the management of temples or temple complex. So, besides these independent administrative units, not in terms of territory, because in terms of territory, we have already seen the demarcation from province to the village level, but at the ground level, in terms of operations, in terms of the different socio-economic background of the members, a number of assemblies were there. Assemblies such as Nadu, Sabha, Mahasabha, Ur, Nagaram, and then there was another important entity, that was the temple complex. The role of temple complex as an institution during the early medieval times in South India is very prominent. The temple complex of South India was not only a religious institution, but it was also a financial institution, because the temple, it was not about a single shrine, but there was horizontal elaboration. You will be studying more about temple complex in your art and culture, but just understand that whenever you hear about a very rich temple or temple having vast reserves of gold, definitely, even without knowing the name, you can guess that it is somewhere in the south. What is it all about that the South Indian temples have become so resourceful over a period of time? There are two reasons. First is that they have received donations for a vast period of time, and second, they have remained largely aloof from the invaders who have eyed the temples of the West India and North India. So the temple complex means multiple shrines are there. These temple complexes over a period of time emerged as an institution within themselves. The temple complexes of South India performed multiple roles. They performed the role of definitely a religious institution, but also of a educational institutions. So when we speak of local assemblies, when we speak of local government, the temple complex in itself was a local institution, a local government. It exercised, it performed educational function. We hear of Ghatika. Now, Ghatika is a land grant for the maintenance of a mutt. Mutt means an educational institution. The temple complex was also a financer. It because it had so much of resource, so sometimes it used to give loan also to the merchants and traders because there was always so much of activity going on in the temple complex. So it was a generator of employment. So it also generated employment, and more than that, it was a platform where people from various sections of the society used to assemble. So in a way, the temple symbolized an integrative force in the society, and being a member of the temple complex was seen to be a matter of prestige. So much so that based on the services provided to the temple complex in the Tamil society, there was demarcation of higher Shudra and lower Shudra. So, Velangai and Idangai. Temple complex, because they were very monumental, they were very beautiful craftsmen, revealing the belief system of the patrons and also the local people. So, this temple complex was patronized by the kings, the Cholas, the Pallavas, the Pandyas. They patronized this temple complex, and by associating with the temple complex, an ideology was created. A thought process was created that the king, who is the patron of the temple complex, is the chosen one of the god, and hence we must be loyal to the king. So, besides these local elements, besides the Sabha or Nagram and Nadu, whenever a question comes about the management of affairs in a democratic way, please mention temple complexes as well.